It's fine, no one is going to come anyway. She's old, and there's no way she's coming since she's probably resting in her room by now.
It's her wedding day, and I feel sorry for your wife.
On the day of the wedding, when I went to the waiting room, I witnessed Oliver, who was to be my husband today, cheating. I had some suspicions because of Oliver's behavior up until now, but I never thought he was actually cheating, so I was stunned with shock. However, my anger soon overtook the shock of being betrayed. It's already starting, so hurry up. So, I quickly gathered people so that the two couldn't make any excuses. My name is Kate, and I am 33 years old. I work at a hospital, where I handle reception and administrative tasks. It's a reasonably large hospital, and because many people visit daily, it's always busy, but it's a rewarding job. I'm not a doctor, but since I have many opportunities to interact with patients every day, I have become interested in medicine, even though it doesn't directly relate to my job. Though I'm just a receptionist, I want to provide an environment where patients, who are likely going through a tough time, can feel at ease. I have a hobby of reading, so I didn't dislike studying, and I often read books at home outside of work. As I continued this life of engaging work and dedicated studying at home, I found myself in my 30s before I knew it. Around me, I started hearing stories of people dating or getting married, and since I rarely went out except to commute between work and home, I gradually began to feel anxious. On top of that, I'm not a very sociable person. While I can talk about work, I feel uncomfortable discussing personal matters, and I've never been in a relationship. Not only have I never been in a relationship, but I don't even have male friends, so I have no experience dealing with the man. My makeup style prioritized cleanliness, so I rarely dressed up in a feminine way and had little interest in it. Until now, I had no dissatisfaction or anxiety about my life, but the thought that I might never be able to get married made me increasingly anxious. Unsure of what to do, I consulted friends from my school days and my parents, and I decided to try arranged matchmaking. When I asked for advice, my parents eagerly arranged an opportunity to meet someone. My parents had never mentioned marriage to me before, but deep down, they probably wanted to see me married and have grandchildren. While the initial motivation came from my anxiety, seeing my parents' somewhat joyful attitude strengthened my desire to get married. I also received various tips from friends on how to dress fashionably and talk to men, and though I was nervous, I decided to go to the matchmaking meeting. And then, I met someone I could consider marrying. He was Oliver, 4 years younger than me. He was a company employee with a bright and sociable personality, seemingly the complete opposite of me. His hobbies were different from mine too. He apparently loved playing sports and exercising frequently. Because of this, after introducing ourselves, I felt a bit intimidated by Oliver's cheerful and energetic demeanor. However, before I knew it, his lively way of speaking drew me in, and I found myself enjoying our conversation. We began discussing our thoughts on marriage, and we quickly found ourselves on the same page. Moreover, Oliver complimented the aspects of myself that I felt were not very feminine.
What are you talking about? Kate, you are calm, domestic, and make people feel at ease. I think it would be wonderful to have someone like you as a wife.
I knew I was being simple-minded, but hearing him say things like that made me feel elated. I started to think that perhaps I could have a good future with this person. I also realized I was attracted to Oliver because he had qualities that I lacked. So, we decided to start dating with marriage in mind and began preparing for the wedding at the same time. While we both wanted to get married and register our marriage as soon as possible, it had only been a short time since we met. So, we decided to proceed carefully. Also, since both of our parents were very happy about our marriage, we wanted to prepare well and make the wedding a wonderful event. We had been preparing to get married a year after we started dating, but I quickly noticed Oliver's flaws. Oliver often forgot the time or our plans, or he would be late. He had mentioned during our matchmaking meeting that he just couldn't get things right outside of work.
I really try to be careful, but I often end up being late for our meetings. Would you please not give up on someone like me?
Hearing Oliver's anxious confession, I felt a sense of determination. Oliver was sociable and cheerful, unlike me, to the point that I felt a little envious. The thought that I could support someone like him made me feel eager. So, I decided not to worry too much about it and to do my best to help Oliver fix his bad habits. However, I never imagined it would be this bad. Oliver was late for our dates every single time, and I had to remind him constantly. At first, it was only a few minutes, but it gradually got worse. We've had this plan for a long time. Why are you always late? There were times when he was over an hour late, and I couldn't hide my frustration, no matter how often I told him off. Still, I persistently thought of ways to help him improve and tried to put them into practice. Even when I set reminders on his phone or contacted him in advance, it didn't seem to change much.
I'm really sorry.
Every time, Oliver apologized sincerely, so I thought I needed to be the responsible one, and we continued our relationship. Although I felt at a loss, I never thought of breaking up with him. Aside from this bad habit, he was someone who cared for me and made me happy, so I forgave him each time he was late. Plus, when he said he couldn't help but depend on me, I didn't feel all that bad. Also, his parents were truly wonderful people. They welcomed me warmly, thinking a good person had joined their family, and always showed me kindness and consideration. I found myself getting along well with them and began to cherish them too. So, while I was concerned about Oliver's bad habit, I remained optimistic, thinking things would work out with his kind parents around. However, I couldn't stand that Oliver left almost everything about the wedding plans to me, even though we were supposed to decide on things together. Since we first started dating, Oliver had been working overtime or on weekends, but around 6 months into our relationship, the frequency increased even more. He started coming home just before midnight more often due to overtime, and he was often not around on weekends because of work. He frequently canceled plans we had made to spend time together, claiming that he suddenly had to work. Even though we lived in the same house, there were more and more times when I wouldn't even see him when he came back, and my dissatisfaction grew. I tried to handle everything myself, thinking it was unavoidable because it was his job, but there were limits. If this continued, I started to feel it would be very difficult to stay with Oliver in the future. Hey, we had plans from before, so why do you suddenly have to work? Can't you find a way to take time off? I asked Oliver, puzzled by how often he was called into work.
I can't help it. I'm busy with handovers and such to take time off for the wedding and honeymoon. You wouldn't understand since you don't have a managerial position.
It seemed Oliver was the leader of an important project, and his position comes with more responsibilities than a regular employee. And he said he was currently busy to compensate for the more than a week's leave for the wedding and honeymoon.
This is just how companies work. It's different from your workplace.
Since he explained it was for the wedding and honeymoon, I couldn't strongly oppose it. Also, When he pointed out the differences between a hospital and a company and their respective duties, I couldn't say his workplace was necessarily wrong. I reluctantly accepted his explanation, but it left me in a position where I had to handle everything we were supposed to decide together by myself. Even when I tried to plan things for the two of us, Oliver would say he had urgent work and leave me alone every time. Hey, how can you be called into work so often like this? You're hardly participating in any of the wedding preparations. I expressed my frustration with Oliver, who rarely came to our wedding planning meetings. I also began to feel distrustful of the company that constantly demanded overtime and weekend work and grew worried about Oliver's health, as he never seemed to get proper rest.
I know it's not fair to leave everything to you. It's just for now.
But every time, Oliver would apologize, and nothing would be resolved. Still, this is just too much. Do you realize how much overtime you're doing? When I suggested we should inquire about it, given the excessive overtime, Oliver got angry and told me not to do anything unnecessary.
It's really just for now, so don't cause trouble for the company.
It seemed like we were on the verge of a fight, so I forced myself to accept Oliver's explanation. But I couldn't help wondering if it was really only temporary. However, since I had no other complaints about Oliver and had built a good relationship with his parents, I kept telling myself it was just for now. And finally, the wedding day arrived. It had been tough since I had prepared almost everything by myself, but I was happy to have made it to this day without any issues. Today's plan was to change into our wedding attire, have a photo session, then have a formal meeting between both families, including our relatives, before the ceremony. I started getting ready around 5 a.m. and changed into my dress. I had tried on the dress when I chose it, but perhaps because it was the actual wedding day, it looked different from before, maybe because of the different feeling in the air. My parents also looked happy and complimented me, saying I looked beautiful, which made me feel a bit embarrassed. Then, I saw Oliver, who had finished changing, so I looked at him, trying to calm my excited heart. You look great, Oliver. It's finally our wedding day. Seeing Oliver in a white tuxedo gave me a real sense that we were getting married, and I felt my heart swell as I spoke. Thinking about how we would be husband and wife from today, I felt a smile naturally spreading on my face. Oliver smiled back at me, looking equally happy.
You look absolutely stunning, Tate. I've relied on you so much until now, but from now on, I'll be the one to support you.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. Oliver spoke with a voice full of determination, and I smiled, feeling a sense of happiness. After the photos were taken, we had the formal meeting between both families. All the relatives looked happy, and Oliver's parents smiled with relief. My parents also looked delighted, and my mother was already crying tears of joy. It had been challenging up until now, but hearing words of congratulations from my relatives almost made me cry with happiness even though the ceremony hadn't even started yet. After the family meeting ended, there was some time before the ceremony, so I decided to take a little break. I had been moving around since early morning and hadn't eaten much because of the dress, so I was feeling tired. Since the ceremony was still ahead, I decided to take it easy and have a light snack just in case. My parents said they were going to take a walk around the venue and chat with other guests who would be arriving soon. Today's venue was quite luxurious, and they seemed excited to look around. Watching my parents enjoying themselves, I decided to spend some quiet time in the waiting room, reading over the letter I had prepared to read to them during the ceremony. Oliver was in a different room, saying he was checking the ceremony arrangements. It seemed that Oliver was genuinely concerned about leaving all the wedding preparations to me until now, which gave me a bit of relief. Despite all the reminders, he hadn't improved much before, but now I felt that things might be okay. However, as I sat and rested, I found myself unable to fully relax, thinking about the upcoming wedding. Once I finished reviewing my parts of the ceremony, I began to feel uneasy being alone. Since I was feeling rested from the break, I decided to join Oliver and review the ceremony arrangements with him. I quietly walked to the front of the room where Oliver was supposed to be alone, but I heard voices, which made me hesitate to enter for a moment. I quickly reassured myself that it was probably just a staff member and was about to enter when I noticed something strange about the conversation. I couldn't hear the exact words, but the tone felt odd. It didn't sound like a business conversation or chatting with a friend. It had a certain sweetness, like that between lovers. I thought it was just my imagination, but I felt a vague sense of unease, so I secretly peeked inside the room. That's when I saw Oliver and a woman I didn't know clearly engaging in an act of infidelity.
It's fine. No one will come for a while.
With those words, Oliver began his act of betrayal.
It's your wedding day, and yet, your wife is so pitiful.
The woman did nothing to stop him and seemed pleased with Oliver's words. I had suspected infidelity before because of Oliver's frequent overtime, but I convinced myself that Oliver would never cheat. Moreover, Oliver seemed excited about the wedding and was not neglecting me, so I thought I was just overthinking. I kept telling myself I was being overly worried since he seemed to look forward to our wedding. So, while it was shocking to witness the infidelity, part of me also felt a sense of understanding. Reflecting on Oliver's past behavior, everything seemed to make sense if he was indeed cheating. I felt a brief wave of sadness as I thought, I knew it, but I quickly became angry at Oliver's selfish actions. After a moment of shock, I immediately pulled out my phone and started recording the scene. I was determined not to cry or feel defeated, and despite feeling disgusted by their behavior, I continued to record the video carefully. Once I secured the evidence of their affair, I quietly moved away from the room so they wouldn't notice me and called my parents and in-laws to inform them. It's happening, please come quickly. I tried to stay calm, but I wasn't able to explain things very clearly. My parents and in-laws seemed confused by the sudden call, but I told them to quietly gather at Oliver's waiting room as soon as possible and ended the call. I immediately sent them the video evidence of the affair as well. Soon after, my parents, in-laws, and even some of Oliver's co-workers arrived. Apparently, they had been together when I contacted them, and they were curious enough to come. After watching the video I sent them and realizing that Oliver was cheating, they came along in disbelief. At work, Oliver was a very trustworthy employee, and they wanted to see the truth for themselves. With tense faces, we steeled ourselves and burst into the room. Inside, the two were disheveled, almost naked. It was a scene so appalling that there was no way they could deny their affair.
Whoa! What the hell is going on?
Oh, no!
The two, startled and screaming, were met with furious expressions from everyone.
What on earth are you doing?
Oliver's parents were especially angry because they had been worried about him and were excited about the wedding since it was decided. Even Oliver's co-workers were staring at him with looks of disbelief. One of the co-workers then revealed that Oliver's mistress was a woman named Julia, who worked at the same company. She had been flirting with Oliver since she first joined, and since she was beautiful, it seemed Oliver didn't mind her advances. As Julia was a junior, Oliver seemed to be looking out for her in various ways. However, even after Oliver's marriage was decided, their closeness remained unchanged, and there were quiet rumors in the company that they might be having an affair. But since Oliver had a bright personality and a good work ethic, very few people took the rumors seriously. It was thought they were simply close co-workers. This trust in Oliver made their shock all the more profound. Pressed by his co-workers, who couldn't believe it, the two started making excuses.
This isn't an affair. It's a misunderstanding.
That's right. We didn't do anything so disgraceful.
I was astonished that they could say such things so boldly in their current state, so I showed the video I had taken as evidence of their affair. Are you still going to deny it after this? The video made it impossible for them to lie, and the expressions of everyone else grew even harsher. Ignoring the severe looks from everyone around them, the two continued to protest loudly.
What? When did you take this? Did you secretly film us?
Only a horrible woman would secretly film like that.
To my shock, they admitted to the affair but then turned around and accused me of secretly filming them. They were trying to change the subject to avoid blame for the affair. But my father immediately shouted back in anger.
Don't be ridiculous. You two are the disgraceful ones. You hurt my daughter, and now you have the nerve to say that?
Oliver seemed to lose his confidence in the face of my father's intensity, but he continued to make excuses.
It's really not an affair. It was just a little fun before the wedding.
At that terrible excuse, Julia became furious.
What? What are you saying? You promised to divorce that old woman and marry me. Was that a lie?
Hearing Julia's words, I felt the last shred of trust one had in Oliver vanish. The fact that he was having an affair was unforgivable, but hearing from Julia how he spoke poorly of me made it all the more infuriating. And when Julia confronted him, Oliver's response was even worse.
You can't even do housework. You're fine as a playmate, but not someone I want to marry.
With that, the two began to argue. Their self-centered arguments were so outrageous that I was completely dumbfounded. It became clear to me that Oliver had only thought of me as a convenient woman. Until now, I had considered some of Oliver's faults endearing because he was younger, but I couldn't deal with it anymore. When I let out a deep sigh, Oliver desperately tried to plead with me.
The one I really want to marry is you, Kate. This woman is just saying things. It's not true. Please believe me.
Oliver tried to put all the blame on Julia, insisting that he wasn't actually cheating and that he just wanted to enjoy some last bit of freedom before marriage. He seemed unaware of how absurd he sounded. Even though I was the one he was supposed to be dating before the wedding, he had prioritized Julia. I couldn't believe he would still make excuses after being caught red-handed in the act of cheating. I was initially calm, but Oliver's sheer shamelessness made my anger flare up again. You kept saying it was for work, but you were just cheating. I don't want to marry someone who lies about overtime and weekend work. So, I firmly rejected Oliver. I absolutely didn't want to spend my life with someone who thought of me as nothing more than a convenient housekeeper. Moreover, Oliver had lied about work and broken almost every promise he made to me. Even though it was our wedding, he left all the preparations to me while he cheated. I had already suspected something was wrong, so I had checked with his company about his work hours. They told me that Oliver rarely worked overtime, and since he started dating me, he had always gone home on time, saying he needed to prepare for the wedding. They also said there was no such thing as weekend work. They mentioned that things hadn't been particularly busy in recent months, so no one had worked on the weekends.
What? You checked up on me?
When I revealed that I had inquired about his work schedule, Oliver complained, but his face turned pale. His coworkers, who hadn't known that he was lying about his work, seemed even more disappointed in him. Until I saw the affair with my own eyes, I hadn't believed he was cheating, so I tried to convince myself that there must be some reason behind what I found out about his work hours. I had even naively thought that he might be planning a surprise for me. Looking back, I see how overly optimistic I was, but at the time, I truly trusted Oliver. I believed he was genuinely thinking about me, but now it was clear that wasn't the case. Who would willingly marry someone who seems likely to cheat again? I can't do this anymore with you. The wedding is off.
No way. Please don't. Think it over.
Oliver looked shocked as I firmly rejected him, but he had brought this upon himself. You will also pay for the cancellation of this wedding and compensate me for the emotional damage caused by your infidelity. When I announced that I was canceling the wedding and would demand compensation, Oliver panicked again.
What? The wedding is about to start. You can't just cancel it now.
Are you saying I have to pay too? No way. Absolutely not.
Hearing Oliver say he didn't want to cancel the wedding because it would be embarrassing, I couldn't help but think, who is the one who should be embarrassed? Julia also began to complain, saying she didn't want to pay any compensation. I had plenty to say to Oliver, who had been caught cheating at the wedding venue, but I was speechless at his outrageous remarks. As for Julia, I felt like I was looking at something incomprehensible, cheating and then making such claims. While the two angrily protested, my in-laws immediately spoke up on my behalf.
It's because you cheated. Don't talk back. You fool of a son.
You've done nothing but cause trouble for Kate. You better make amends properly.
Scolded by my in-laws with intense anger, Oliver started to cry, though reluctantly, while his co-workers helped quiet him down. Faced with the cold, accusing stares and voices of their colleagues, the two began to cry even more. Then, we explained the situation to the guests who had already gathered, and the event was dismissed. At first, the guests seemed confused, but from the expressions of my parents and in-laws, they seemed to understand the truth. Everyone left, expressing their sympathy for me. My friends were worried about me, suddenly finding myself with a broken engagement, but I felt relieved that I had discovered Oliver's infidelity before getting married. So, I told them not to worry and assured them that I was okay. After dealing with the aftermath of the wedding, I demanded compensation for emotional distress from Oliver and Julia.
We didn't end up getting married, so there's no need for compensation for the affair. You just want money, don't you?
Oliver resisted paying, arguing that we hadn't officially registered the marriage, but I made sure he paid up. Originally, we had planned to register the marriage before the ceremony, but we decided to register together after the wedding. I thought it would be safer to wait until after the wedding to avoid any last-minute work calls for Oliver. With Oliver's affair being exposed, I was relieved we hadn't registered our marriage yet. Julia also tried to resist, but after I contacted her parents and explained the situation, they got angry with her and made sure she paid. After the discussion about compensation, Oliver sent me numerous messages asking to reconcile, but when I informed his parents, the messages stopped. I later heard that Oliver lost the trust of his company, was demoted to a regular employee, and his salary was reduced. He was then transferred to a remote location, effectively ending his chances for promotion. Oliver, who had been popular at work, couldn't handle the cold treatment from his colleagues and ended up quitting shortly before the transfer. Now, he is trying to find a new job, but his attitude during interviews has been poor, and the news of his affair has spread, making things difficult. Since we had explained the situation to the wedding guests, the rumors quickly spread. People now know that Oliver cheated with someone from his workplace despite being engaged, and they doubt his basic sense of morality. It's believed that having Oliver around would disturb the company's environment. Julia, who was a contract employee, did not have her contract renewed due to this incident, and she too is struggling to find work. Branded as the mistress, she faces the same difficulties as Oliver. Without savings after paying compensation, she is financially strapped. Because of this, she reportedly tried to force her way into Oliver's home, insisting they get married, but this led to fights with Oliver, who had no intention of marrying her. Oliver accused her of being after his money, but when I heard this rumor, I couldn't help but laugh, wondering how he could even say such a thing. As for me, this experience made me realize I didn't need to rush into marriage. However, a friend who was worried about me introduced me to a man who shared my hobbies as a way to cheer me up. At first, I wasn't interested, but since we had similar interests and values, we continued to stay in touch. Now, we often spend time together as friends, and my days feel more fulfilling than before. As I spent time with my first male friend, I realized I had been wrong in thinking I had to marry Oliver, believing there was no one else for me. Because of this, my anxiety about marriage disappeared, and I decided that if I were to consider marriage in the future, I would calmly choose my partner after careful consideration. How did you find this story? Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.